To speak now of the true temper of empire, it is a thing rare and hard to keep. Say, for example, here you will find that somehow the speaker is focusing at the particular term empire, but we can think about the emperors. Okay, the temper of empire, it is being transferred into the temper of emperors. So now he is actually speaking about the empire and he is speaking about the temperament of the emperors. Okay, so he says therefore that to speak now of the true temper of emperors, rather, it is a thing rare and hard to keep. So ultimately it is something rare because you are speaking about the emperor's temperament, that's something different from the ordinary people, and it is very hard to keep it properly. For both temper and distemper consist in contraries. Contrary means, you know, it's the contrast. Okay, that is something completely opposite to each other. So ultimately you will find, if you consider, if you focus at any emperor, if you focus at a king, then fundamentally you will find that in some point there are something related to the temper, and at another point there is the matter with the distemper. Both are actually present within the temperament of the emperor. That has been pointed out. Just to speak now of the true temper of empire, it is a thing rare and hard to keep. For both temper and distemper consist of contraries, because you will find that, you know, if you think about the emperors, then the contrary or contrasting behavior, contrary or contrasting temperament being present within a single person. But it is one thing to mingle contraries, another to interchange them, you see. So ultimately, if you think about the contraries, if you think about the contrasting behaviors, and then you are mixing, you are mingling that, it is one thing. And another is to interchange them. That means from bad to good and from good to bad. Interchange. The answer of Apollonius to Vespasian is full of excellent instruction. So now you are, if you are finding the particular reference to that the words that have been spoken to Vespasian by Apollonius. Okay, this is a very important section because multiple times we see that the questions come from this section. That what did Apollonius say to Vespasian? What was the answer and what does it implicate? So therefore it says the answer of Apollonius to Vespasian is full of excellent instruction. You know, as I've already mentioned, that so far as the classicists are concerned, so far as the impact of classicism is concerned, then ultimately you will find always each and every kind of literary work, each and every kind of literature, they are actually thinking about, they are actually projecting on a kind of, you know, moralistic undertone or overtone rather. So ultimately, when you are reading about Apollonius and Vespasian, ultimately these are referring to the various kinds of, you know, various kinds of instruction. That means, you know, instruction, it actually provides you the instruction and therefore you will feel something better about it. So it says the answer of Apollonius to Vespasian is full of excellent instruction. Now, Vespasian asked Apollonius, what was Nero's overthrow? Who is Nero? I have already mentioned about him. Okay, the Roman emperor. The question that actually Vespasian asked to Apollonius, that what was the reason why Nero actually failed? He answered, Nero could touch and tune the harp well. Ultimately, we have been informed that Nero was a person who was, you know, who actually took interest in playing the harp. Okay, and whenever there is a matter with the musical instrument, we feel, we know that somehow the musical instrument does have, you know, the higher note and the lower note, right? So here it says that he answered, Nero could touch and tune the harp well. Harp is the musical instrument. So Nero could touch it properly. Nero could play it properly, tune the harp well. But in government, sometimes he used to wind the pins too high. So ultimately, you can identify that the image that had been created, it is that of, you know, playing the harp or playing the musical instrument. What happens when you are tuning the harp at too high note, and at sometimes you are tuning the harp in a low note. So therefore, this particular orientation of tuning the harp and playing the same has been transferred to that of the administration. That means performing the activities in administration. So that's why it says that Nero could touch and tune the harp well, but in government, that means in Nero's government, sometimes he used to wind the pins too high, sometimes to let them down too low. That means he couldn't remain in a proper balance. In some cases, he was very strict, and in some cases, he was very loose or something. মানে কোনো কোনো ক্ষেত্রে দেখা যাচ্ছে যে নেরো যখন তার কাজগুলো চালাচ্ছেন, তার অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশন চালাচ্ছেন, তখন কোনো কোনো ক্ষেত্রে তিনি হয়তো প্রচন্ড শক্ত আর কি, মানে খুব স্ট্রিক্টলি তিনি ডিল করছেন। আবার কোনো কোনো ক্ষেত্রে তিনি এত বেশি ছেড়ে দিচ্ছেন যে এটা নিয়ে একটা সমস্যা তৈরি হচ্ছে। বুঝতে পারেন? So that means it actually points out that performing the harp and continuing the administration, these are not quite similar to each other. These are different, firstly. So your one particular habit of using trivial things or triflings, and that particular habit in your administration, it can mar you, it can be harmful to you. So that's why it says that he answered, Nero could touch the tune the harp well, but in government sometimes he used to wind the pins too high, sometimes to let them down too low. And certain it is that nothing destroyeth authority so much as the unequal and untimely interchange of power, praised too far and relaxed too much. That means such a kind of an imbalance, such a kind of an unequal and untimely interchange of power, which at sometimes praised too far, খুব strict যেটা বললাম, and sometimes relaxed too much. This is very much, harmful. It actually destroys the authority. তুমি যখন সমাজের কোনো একটা গোষ্ঠীকে এত বেশি তাদের জন্য রিল্যাক্সেশন দেবে, আর কোনো একটা গোষ্ঠীর ক্ষেত্রে তুমি প্রচুর পরিমাণ স্ট্রিক্ট হয়ে যাবে, এটা কিন্তু কখনোই ঠিকঠাক ভাবে চলতে পারে না। It actually balance or destroys the equilibrium of the society. সাম্যাবস্থা বিঘ্নিত হয়, and that actually indicates that the destruction is near. And in case of Nero, that particular problem actually occurred. Okay, this is true. Bacon says, this is true that the wisdom of all these latter times in princess affairs is rather fine deliveries and shifting of dangers and mischiefs when they are near, than solid and grounded courses to keep them aloof. That means here it has been pointed out that this is very much problematic. He says that it is true that the wisdom of all these latter times, that means ultimately the wisdom that they gather all these latter times in princess affairs, that means in the affairs of the kings and princes, is rather fine deliveries. That means ultimately these are the stories that can provide them the way out actually. And shifting of dangers and mischiefs when they are near. So ultimately when you feel that the dangers and mischiefs are near, you are then shifting them, তুমি তাদেরকে সরিয়ে রাখছো আর কি। কি বলতে চাইছে, যখন তারা এদের সামনাসামনি হয় এই প্রবলেমগুলো, তখন তারা কি করে, তখন তারা তাদেরকে ওগুলো থেকে দূরে থাকার বদলে তারা যেন মানে উল্টো কাজগুলো করে, যেগুলো করা উচিত না সেগুলো তারা করে থাকে। তাই এখানে বলছেন shifting of dangers and mischiefs when they're near, then solid and grounded courses to keep them aloof. That means they do not feel that how to protect themselves from such kind of problems. Rather they try to shift them. Okay, মানে যখন সেই সমস্যাগুলো সামনে চলে আসছে, তখন কিভাবে একটা ফুল প্রুফ প্ল্যান করে তুমি নিজেকে বাঁচাবে বা সবাইকে বাঁচাবে সেটা না ভেবে তুমি কি করছো, তুমি ডেঞ্জার্স এন্ড মিসচিভস গুলোকে তুমি সেগুলোকে দূরে সরিয়ে রাখছো। মানে ফর দ্য টাইম বিং, উই উইল নট ডিল ইট টুডে, লেট আস থিংক ইট অ্যাবাউট देम টুমরো। And you know very well that tomorrow will come at a very fast speed. So that is the problem. So here it has been said that this is true, that the wisdom of all these latter times in princess affairs is rather fine deliveries and shifting of dangers and mischiefs when they are near than solid and grounded courses to keep them aloof. But this is but to try masteries of with fortune. Okay, so ultimately it has been says that মানে এটা করা মানে হচ্ছে that means you are actually playing with the fortune, ভাগ্য নিয়ে খেলছো, and let men beware how the neglect and suffer matter of trouble to be prepared, for no man can forbid the spark nor tell whence it may come. So ultimately it's a kind of an morality, it's a kind of an, you see, a kind of an advice that have been provided by the essayist. He says that people should be beware the emperor's true. Okay, how the neglect and suffer matter of trouble to be prepared, for no man can forbid the spark. So ultimately you cannot forbid the spark of problems, the spark of, you know, various kinds of problems and tussles and various kinds of dangers, nor you can tell whence it can make it come, that means from where it is coming or when it will come. You cannot say. So therefore you have to be well prepared of everything. So we are literally moving towards the particular section where Bacon will advise the kings that you have to be very much cautious about the future problems that will certainly arise. And ultimately, you have to be well aware of the particular facts about your society, about your kingdom, about your empire. And you have to be cautious about, you know, that have been mentioned here, about your wives and children, clergy, nobles, second nobles, merchants, or men of war, or soldiers, or something. So that's why the groundwork has been created here in this particular stanza or paragraph. So let men beware how the neglect and suffer matter of trouble. So ultimately you are just neglecting your trouble, and you should be prepared, for no man can forbid the spark. Because when the spark will come, and if you neglect them, then certainly it will be converted into a great fire. It will be converted into a great conflagration that will devour you, right? Not till whence it may come. The difficulties in princesses' business are many and great. It's true. That means when you are just running an administration in a very small account, you know, it seems to be very problematic. And now if you think about the kings and emperors, then certainly the larger the dominion, the larger the problems generally. So therefore it says that the difficulties in princesses' business are many and great. But the greatest difficulty is often in their own mind. That means the difficulties are many, but that could be, you know, rectified, and that could be faced. But the actual problem lies in the mind of the emperors. Okay, for it is common with princes, said Tacitus. So ultimately, this is again the particular reference to the ancient text and ancient, you know, discussions that have been said. It says that it is very common with princes to will contradictories. And then there is a Latin phrase that have been provided here, as you can see here. And it is in the work of Tacitus. It actually means, that means the Latin phrase that has been pointed out here, it says, as a rule, the desires of kings are strong and inconsistent. Okay, that means if you think about the desires of kings, these are strong and inconsistent. That means, you know, what is inconsistent? At the present moment, you will find the desires are something, and at the next moment, you will find it will be changed. So that's why the inconsistency. So therefore, it says that for it is the sole system of power to think to command the end, and yet not to endure the mean. So that means it says that ultimately the problem lies in the temperament of the kings, that they do not think about, you know, to protect themselves from the devastation that is awaiting for them. Rather, they're actually thinking about the commanding, okay, the command itself. মানে বলতে চাইছে যে প্রয়োজনীয় পদক্ষেপগুলো ওরা নেয় না, নিতে পারে না, তাই হোক না কেন, এবং সেইটা তার একটা ভুল আর কি, মানে যেটা ও ক্ষমতাটাকে অনেক বেশি গুরুত্ব দেয় এবং তার ফলে রিসোর্সেস অফ পাওয়ার এটাকে অনেক বেশি গুরুত্ব দেয় এবং যে কারণে সে যেটা করা প্রয়োজন সেটা ওখানে করে না। কি করা প্রয়োজন সেগুলো আর কি পরের দিকে আমাদের এখানে পরপর বলছে যে কিংস হ্যাভ টু ডিল উইথ দেয়ার নেইবার্স, their wives, their children, their prelates or clergy, their nobles, with second nobles, that is the second category of noble people, their merchants, their commons, and their men of war. So here you will find the list has been provided. Neighbors means the neighboring countries, literally. Okay. And then one by one, you will find them. That means all these segments that he has actually mentioned here regarding the neighbors or wives and children, prelates or clergy, the noblemen, that means, you know, that the persons who are coming from the Senate section actually. Second nobles, that means the persons of higher rank, but these are not from the highest rank. Then the merchants, then the commoners, that means the subjects actually. And the men of war, that means the soldiers. So they should be aware about everything. Now, in different paragraphs, you will find that Bacon is actually pointing towards the various kinds of problems, various kinds of threats that may arise here. So these will be discussed in detail. Here it says that, and their men of war, and from all these arise dangers. So these are very much dangerous from everything, you see. If care and circumspection be not used, if not properly maintained, if not properly cared, then ultimately from each and every section that is surrounding you actually, various kinds of problems will certainly arise. And then one by one, the paragraphs are telling us something about them. The first one is for the neighbors. As I've mentioned, that the neighbors to a king, the neighbors are actually indicating the neighboring countries. So when you are the king, ultimately you should be very much thoughtful, you should be very much careful about your neighboring countries. Okay, there can no general rule be given, as it has been pointed out. So you can't say anything about the general rule. One particular rule can be ascribed, can be followed by each and every king and emperor. It can be said so. It says first for the neighbors, there can be no general rule be given. For occasions are so variable. You see that one particular king may face different problems, and you cannot generalize them because the situations are different, the people are different, the orientations are different, so the problems are different too. So these are variable. So there can no general rule be given, for occasions are so variable, except one. Save one means except one. So everything is variable except something one. You see, whichever holdeth, which is that princes do keep due sentinel. So that means one thing that could be considered, that one thing that should be followed by each and every king and each and every, you know, emperor, that you must keep due sentinel. Sentinel, you know, it actually indicates that you must provide a good observation over others. You know, just keep a look at the people, or keep a look at the countries that are actually surrounding you. Okay. And that's why the due sentinel, due observation, or due surveillance rather, this is very much important for a king to think about the future problems that will arise from them. So which is that princes do keep due sentinel, that none of their neighbors do ever grow so by increase of territory, by embracing of trade, by approaches or the like, either by increasing territory, তারা খুব বড় হয়ে যাচ্ছে, যত বড় হচ্ছে তত পাওয়ারফুল হচ্ছে, or by embracing of trade, তাদের ব্যবসা বাণিজ্য অনেক বেড়ে যাচ্ছে অন্য কান্ট্রি। যত ব্যবসা বাণিজ্য বাড়বে কি হবে? More the trade, more the flow of money, more the flow of money, more the power. Okay. Think about in the present scenario, you will find that what actually Bacon stated there at the time, it is true. You cannot think about the other countries which are surrounding India. Okay, they were not at the same position, say 40 or 50 years before. But now, if you think about the present scenario, then you will find that by embracing the trade, they are gradually making money. And when they are making money, with that particular money, they can they can just, you know, expand on creating or maybe inventing something, some problematic issues. I'm not dealing with them in detail. You know everything. So that's why it says by increase of territory, by embracing of trade, by approaches, that means approaches of trade or doing everything actually, or the like. So therefore, neighbors to ever grow so as they become more able to annoy them than they were. That means when they will be growing stronger, they will annoy you the more. So therefore, keep a close surveillance, and whenever you will find that they are growing, you know, large or hurt, then ultimately you should come in between them. And this is generally the work of standing councils. To foresee it, that means to foresee the future, to foresee the hindrances that they will create, and then hinder it, that means stop them. Okay, at the very embryonic forms. When they are in the embryo, when they are just on the verge of, you know, creating something extra or making themselves powerful, you have to just fall there and stop them at that very moment. And then the example, as I mentioned, that whenever you will find the beacon is actually stating something in terms of anything, you know, at the very moment you will find he is providing some examples. He says, during the triumvirate of kings, there is a particular reference to triumvirate, as you can see here. Here it says that during the triumvirate of kings, triumvirate, you know, that when the whole country has been divided into 1 or 2 or 3 major sections, and there you will find a sole ruler has been provided there. They are called the triumvirs. The term triumvirate and triumvirs was applicable at the time of Julius Caesar too. After the death of Julius Caesar, Rome was divided into 3 major sections, as you know. And there are 3 triumvirs. One is Octavius Caesar, who is known as Augustus Caesar. One is Marcus Antonius, who is being considered as the Mark Antony. And the third one is Lepidus. So these are the triumvirates, and these are called the triumvirs. Similar is in the case of England too. So it says that during the triumvirate of kings, King Henry VIII of England, you know, it's the time from 1491 to 1547, King of England he was, from 1509 to 1547. So King Henry VIII of England, then Francis I, who was the king of France actually, and he was also the king of France from 1515 to 1547. Okay, and the Charles V of the emperor, I've already mentioned about Charles V. There was such a watch kept that none of the 3 could win a palm of ground, but the other 2 would straightway balance it, either by confederation or, if need were, by war. So ultimately, each of them, okay, every one of them, they were following the same counsel, same procedure. They kept the surveillance, and whenever there was any particular kind of a hint of a problem, they certainly controlled them, each other. So that's why it says that none of the 3 could win a palm of a ground. So this increasing the territory, it was not possible at the time because it was in a perfect balance, either by confederation or maybe by war. That is the extreme procedure or something. And would not in any wise take up peace at interest. So peace was everywhere prevailing at the time. And the like was done by that league which Guicciardini said was the security of Italy. Now you will find another particular reference has been incorporated. There are ample references of the names, as you see. There is Guicciardini. He was a person, he was the Italian historian and statesman. Okay, and his lifetime was from 1482 to 1540. And the name of the book was Le Historia d'Italia. That means it was the history of Italy. In that particular book, he is actually referring to that. So it says that which Guicciardini said was the security of Italy. The similar kind of procedure was being made between Ferdinando, King of Naples, Lorenzo Medici, and Ludovicus Forza. So potentiates actually. So you will find that these are 3 differences, just like the previous one, as we can see here, the matter with the King of England and Henry VIII and Francis I and Charles V. The similar is in the case of the Ferdinando, the king of Naples, Lorenzo Medici, and Ludovicus Forza. Okay, so the one of Florence, the other of Milan. You will find, if you just go through the Wikipedia, you will find about them, that who are they, what are the time periods and so. So neither is of the opinion, or is the opinion of some of the schoolmen to be received, that a war cannot justly be made. So ultimately, everywhere, whenever we are thinking about the war matters or something like that, everywhere it has been stated that war is something very much problematic, war is very much harmful. It's true in terms of the general people, in terms of the commoners or everything, you know. But ultimately here, Bacon is stating that sometimes you see that war becomes essential. War is something that can create and that can maintain that particular balance truly. So therefore he says that neither is the opinion of some of the schoolmen to be received that a war cannot justly be made, but upon a precedent injury or provocation. So, you know, in sometimes it's been said that, you know, one particular country is creating injury to others, and then the war actually comes to the forefront. Or maybe one particular person is actually provoking others, then ultimately you will find that the war has been pointed out. So here it has been said that the particular statement that without injury, without provocation, no war can be possible, it is not true. In some cases, war is needed. War is essential just to control the balance, just to control the equilibrium. So without injury, without provocation, war can also be made. That has been stated here. For there is no question, but a just fear of an imminent danger, though there be no blow given, is a lawful cause of a war. So ultimately, no blow is given, no provocation was there, no precedent injury was there, okay? But the fear that if I am not, or if I do not fall into these and, you know, protect my country at this very moment, it will create larger problems. So therefore, in some cases, war may be considered as a lawful cause, okay? Because you are fearing that an imminent danger is waiting for your country, and now at the present scenario, you are just to secure the future, just to control the future, you are taking the state towards war at present. It is sometimes you see that the war is being created at this very moment. And now in this particular paragraph, the description has been provided to their wives. What it says, for their wives, there are cruel examples of them. Say, Livia is infamed for poisoning of her husband. Roxalana, Solomon's wife, was the destruction of that renowned prince. So these are the examples you see. You will find that who is this Livia. You will find who is this Roxalana, who is Solomon. Okay, I'm not going with the reference to them. That means who are they and what they actually did. You will find them in your Wikipedia entry. So, but now you will find that why they have been maintained, they have been mentioned, why they have been pointed out here, just because they are the persons, they are the quote-unquote wives who are solely responsible for the destruction of their husbands. So Livia is infamed for the poisoning of her husband. Roxalana, Salman's wife, was the destruction of the renowned prince, Sultan Mustafa, and otherwise troubled his house and succession. Edward II of England, his queen, had the principal hand in the deposing and murder of her husband. This kind of danger is then to be feared chiefly when the wives have plots for the raising of their own children, or else that they be avowed tresses. Okay, avowed tresses means it is being associated with adulteries. Okay, so either why did these queens are killing their husbands as the kings? Either, you know, that the kings had more than one wife. Okay, and ultimately you will find that certainly that they have their child or children by them. So each and everywhere it has been found that somehow the one particular queen is very much cautious about making her own son to become the king, and therefore it sometimes happened, you know, that they are scheming plots. At another point, you will find that in some cases it has been found that somehow the queens are becoming adulteresses. That means the adulterers. And when they are engaged in adultery, that means they are keeping another relation with any other person. And in such cases, sometimes it happens that they are plotting or scheming to kill their husbands, that's the kings. So just go through these particular sections. Just go through these names and what actually happened to them. I'm not going with the detail. You will find them in Wikipedia. Now it is the matter with the children. As we know that the children of the kings and emperors, they are very much problematic and troublesome to the kings in some cases. It says for the children, the tragedies likewise of dangers from them have been many. So there are ample references. And generally, the entering of fathers into suspicion of the children had been ever unfortunate. So whenever a father could, if he becomes suspicious about the activities of her child, her own son, his own son, it seems to be very much problematic to the kings and to the fathers, obviously. When you are suspecting, when you are suspicious about the activities of your son and thinking that whenever the situation comes, that my own son will kill myself or kill me, this is something very much, disturbing to a father. And that actually happened. Okay, the history actually provides us the examples about that. Therefore, it says, and generally the entering of fathers into suspicion of the children hath been ever unfortunate. And now the example again, you will find the destruction of Mustafa that we named before was so fatal to Solomon's line as the succession of the Targs from Solomon until this day is suspected to be untrue and of strange blood. So ultimately here the particular reference has been provided. So he says that somehow the death was so problematic and death was so disturbing. Okay, because he was actually suspecting that the son was coming from a different bloodline, and just for that particular reason, you will find that the son is actually creating disturbances, and he is becoming responsible of killing the father and something. So regarding the turkeys and something, so these have been pointed out in the Wikipedia section, and you will go with them. For the Selimas, the second was thought to be suppositious. The description, a destruction of Crispus, a young prince of rare towardness, by Constantinus the Great, his father, was in like manner fatal to his house. So everywhere you will find the reference to Suleiman, reference to Mustafa, reference to Crispus, reference to Constantinus. So these are all, pointed out. These are all you will find being mentioned in the internet, and just go through them. I will not go with them in proper detailing. Similarly, you will find by Constantinus the Great, his father was in like manner fatal to his house, for both Constantinus and Constans, his sons, died violent deaths. And the kings are actually killing their sons. And Constantinus, his other son, did little better, who died indeed of sickness, but after that, Julianus had taken arms against him. Again, another reference, the destruction of Demetrius. The destruction of Demetrius, son of Philip II of Macedon, turned upon the father who died of repentance. And many like examples there are, but few or none where the fathers had good by such distrust, except it were where the sons were up in open arms against them. So in some cases you will find the matter with the trust is taken for consideration, but in some cases you will find the son is actually joining hands. They were up in open arms, that means directly they're fighting against their fathers, as was Salimas the first against Balazid or Bazazid, and the three sons of the Henry II, King of England. They are also a kind of a tussle, direct tussle between the father and son was prefigured and was seen, obviously. For the prelates, who are the prelates? Prelates were priests. When they are proud and great, there is also danger from them. The problem is, that whenever you are thinking about the kings, okay, what happens that at one point there are the kings, at another point you have the priests. Now, to the people, to the subjects, or maybe the people of the country, whose authority is more powerful? with this particular question is becoming more important. Kings or maybe the priests. In some cases, you will find somehow that the authority, that means when king is controlling the priest or the head priest is controlling the king. Regarding that, the problem actually arises. As we know that at the time of Queen Elizabeth, church was so powerful that it could control the king, obviously. Okay, that means Queen Elizabeth or maybe James the First or something, a tussle was continuing, you know. And regarding that particular orientation, that who is more powerful, there are ample texts you will find. Here you will find that there are some problems that have been pointed out here. For example, when they're proud, the priests are proud and great, there is also danger from them, as it was in the times of Anselmus, Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury. You know, it's very famous. It is very problematic issue actually regarding Archbishop of Canterbury, regarding Thomas Becket. And there is a particular text that has been written by T.S. Eliot, a poetic drama. Its name was Murder in the Cathedral. That actually, in a different way obviously, but it is focusing more importance on Thomas Becket. It actually happened that Thomas Becket was the Archbishop of Canterbury. Once he was a counselor, okay, and the chancellor of the king at the time, a close friend. But later Thomas Becket had become a priest, and then he has been transferred into the Archbishop of Canterbury. And then the tussle between the king and Thomas Becket actually came to the forefront, and ultimately Thomas Becket was killed by the king. Okay. So here you will find that the same orientation has been provided, the tussle between the king and the prelates, the churchmen. So here it says, as it was in the time of Anselmus and Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, who with their croziers, you know, the kings had the scepters and the archbishops or bishops had the croziers in their hand, did almost try it with the king's sword. That means the tussle between the scepter and crozier, king's sword and crozier, it actually clashed in between. And yet they had to deal with stout and haughty kings. There are kings like William Rufus, Henry I, Henry II. So the question was there. The danger is not from the state, but where it had a dependence of foreign authority, or where the churchmen come in and are elected not by the collection of the kings or particular patrons, but by the people. So when the churchman, when the priest, when the bishop or archbishop has been elected by the people in general, then the problem becoming more powerful. Because in case of king, as we know, that it is the hereditary post to some extent. Okay, one particular descendant of a king, he becomes the king. But in case of these persons, you know, this is associated with such kind of orientations. Okay, so that's why it says that in some cases have been found, you know, that the foreign authority, it comes to, you know, instigating such kind of problem, to create problems within the state, within the country. In some cases, one particular archbishop, one particular churchman has been instigated by any foreign country people or foreign king. Okay, and the problem actually occurs. You will find that when you will go through Dr. Faustus, the particular episode of Bruno, this actually indicates this particular problem regarding the making of the Pope and the problem that actually occurs there. Okay, and in some cases, one particular Pope has been associated with any group of kings. At another level, Section Bruno was associated with another group of kings. So the political agenda, the political problem regarding the selection of the Pope, that actually being discussed in a different way in Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. So that's why the prelates or the clergymen, or maybe you will find here that the problems with the priests have been incorporated here. Now there is the matter with the nobles. What it says, nobles means, as I mentioned, it's the ministers or maybe the persons who are actually the courtmen. Here it is stated, for the nobles to keep them at a distance. So don't mess with them. And then says, if you try to keep a distance between yourself and them, then it is not amiss. It is not very much problematic to you. Keep a safe distance from them. It may make a king more absolute, but less safe. That means here it says that if you depress them, try to keep distance from the nobles, but if you depress them, certainly you will be absolute. That means there will be no particular danger from them literally. But if you depress them, then certainly it may create the civil war. Okay, because the nobles, they can control the people, and that's why it will create you, or it will make you less safe and less able to perform, because in everywhere you will find that you have to pass your orders through Senate, and Senate is being crowded by these nobles. Okay, the House of Lords, remember. So ultimately, if you have to pass any decree, then certainly it should be passed at the higher or upper house. And if you depress the nobles, then you will find some problems there. So that's why you will be less able to perform properly anything that he desires. I have noted it in my history of King Henry VII of England. Bacon says, again another example, that Henry VII of England, the similar problem actually occurred, who depressed his nobility, wherever it came to pass that his times were full of difficulties and troubles. So it was not very easy to perform all his duties and to rule his people. So everywhere, from everything, you see, the nobles are creating some disturbances. But the nobility, though they continued loyal unto them, they showed loyalty. Yet, did they not cooperate with them in his business? They showed loyalty in public, but ultimately they didn't cooperate in the process of ruling or continuing the authority and administration in this kingdom. So that in effect, he was fain or desirous to do all things himself. So ultimately, the king couldn't find any particular help and cooperation from his nobles. So therefore, he had to do everything alone. And that was very problematic, you see. And now it is the reference with the second nobles, that means the second category. And here Bacon says there is not much danger from them, being a body dispersed. So the second noble, these are the followers of the first group, right? So that's why it says the second nobles, they are being a body dispersed. That means they are the followers of the first group. So there is not much danger from them. They may sometimes discourse high, they may say something high, speak something high. The harangues are there, the discussions are there, but that not little hard. So it will not create any hard to you or anything hard to you. Besides, they are a counterpoise to the higher nobility. Sometimes you see that ultimately it's the counterpoise, but that means there are ultimately they are thinking differently, or sometimes counterpoising means when you are opposing. So they are a counterpoise to the higher nobility. That is what the higher nobility actually speaks about. The lower nobility, the second nobles, they are thinking something completely contrasting to it. So that's why that they grow not too potent. So their works and their activities, their ideas, these are not too potent, too powerful to create any disturbance in your life. And lastly, being the most immediate in authority with the common people, think about they are the House of Commons, say for example. They are related with the common people, commoners. They do best temper popular commotion. So ultimately what they can do, they can just uprise any kind of revolution, any kind of problem among them. Revolution is a larger term, I'm not telling you them. It can create some disturbances at the local pockets. Now the next one, merchants. The merchants are very important, you see, because they are actually providing you the taxes. And when they're providing you the taxes, this will be considered to be your vein, blood veins or something. It says that for the merchants, they are vena porta. What is vena porta? It is the circulatory system, the blood flowing nerves, you see. So it says for the merchants, they are the vena porta. And if they flourish not, a kingdom may have good limbs, but will have empty veins and nourished little. So ultimately, the merchants have to be provided with maximum exposure. That means if the merchants, they grow properly, they flourish properly, then the economy, the flow of economy at the treasury of the king will be larger, and it will create, the circulatory system of the kingdom proper, and ultimately it will be to some extent a kind of improvement and progress of the kingdom will be near. So that's why it says the merchants are the vena porta, that is the circulatory system, and if they flourish not, a kingdom may have good limbs. You have the good limbs, but ultimately with empty veins. The veins are not there. Taxes and imposts upon them do seldom go to the king's revenue. So ultimately, if you think of overcharging taxes, then ultimately it will certainly make you earn something, make your treasury fill with money from them. But ultimately, it will create some problems. What it says the taxes and imposts upon them do seldom go to the king's revenue. For that wins in the 100, he loses in the shire. So it's a kind of a proverb that it says that if you impose much more taxes there, then you will find hundreds, but you will lose multiple others. Okay, so you will find the, say, momentary treasure here, but ultimately you will lose everything. The particular rates being increased, but the total bulk of trading rather decreased. So you will earn money, but the bulk of trading will be decreased due to the over-taxation. So don't try to impose over-taxation on them. It will lessen the capabilities or possibilities of proper merchandising. And it will obviously affect your treasury in the larger term or in far future. And now it is the matter with the commoners, the common subjects, what it says. For the commoners or commons, there is little danger from them. Okay, the commoners are not very much problem-making people, except it be where they have great and potent heads. So there are some, the heads, neta. So be aware of those netas or their leaders. Or where you meddle with the point of religion or the custom or means of life. So here Bacon is stating, don't meddle with them in terms of religion. Religion, custom, or their proper way of life leading. These are very much sensitive issues. Don't try to poke your nose into their customs. Don't try to disturb their rites and rituals and religions. Because it is a sensitive issue, and ultimately if you try to create some problem there, then ultimately your life will be miserable. So don't do that. So that is the kind of thing that have been spoken by Bacon. And now it is the time with the men of war, that means the soldiers. Bacon says it is a dangerous state where they live and remain in a body or are used to donatives. So that means don't consider or don't provide the possibility that the soldiers are creating bodies, groups. The group of soldiers are very much problematic, you see. And don't provide them donations. That means don't provide them anything related to money and property or something. That the soldier has participated in the battle and we have won in the battle. So therefore, I am providing him an amount of money like donatives. Don't do that. Why? Whereof we see examples in the Janissaries. Now, the reference of the Janissaries being pointed out here, you will find that it is actually indicating towards one of the former body of Turkish infantry, constituting the Sultan's guard and the main part of the standing army. So that actually happened. So we see examples in the Janissaries and Praetorian bands of Rome, but trainings of men and arming them in several places and under several commanders and without donatives are things of defense and no danger. That means train them properly, give arms to them at several places or place them in several places, under several commanders, not a single commander. Don't give them donations, and then this will be very much very much helpful to you. Okay, it will not create any problem that actually happened to the Janissaries and the Praetorian bands of Rome. So when a particular uprising had been made by these group of soldiers, okay, so ultimately just keep them at a check there. So these are the points that being deliberately and discussed by Bacon in a great detail. And then he says, princes are like to heavenly bodies. He ends with the thing with which he actually began this particular essay, that princes are to be considered as the heavenly bodies which cause good or evil times. Here, heavenly bodies, you can say that it is referring to the constellations, like you see, that the constellations can influence in the changing the good and evil times to human being. It has been taught in astrology. So it says, just like the heavenly bodies, the princes are like that. The princes can control your good and evil times, and which have much veneration but no rest. So, you know that princes or kings, they do not find rest, but they are being respected, awfully respected, venerated by all. So all precepts or precepts concerning kings, so ultimately the advices that have been provided for the kings are in effect comprehended in those two remembrances. So all the advices, all the precepts concerning the kings that have been provided here, these are given by thinking about two particular lines or two particular expressions in Latin, the two remembrances. What are they? It says, remember that thou art man, and remember that thou art God. Both things have been pointed out, that you are man at one point and you are God at another point. As you are man, so you have your own limitations, and as you are God, so you have your own willpower. So control them properly. The one, that is the first one, that as you are the man, the one bridled, okay, or bridled their power, and the other their will. So one is related to the power, and the second is their willpower, ultimately. So both have been associated with the first thing that actually been discussed at the very beginning with this particular form. That one is related to the human beings, and in case of the human beings, you will find that you have your own power and in the limitations of your power. And the second, as you are God, so you have to control your own will and something. So with this particular reference, here you will find somehow that the essay comes to an end.